Today's story was written by Reddit user ExcuseSafe. Standing imposing over the long table, seating dozens of soldiers, the Dusk General asked everyone unlucky enough to be sitting down, slamming his hands on the table in anger when he began his inquisition. "Now, gentlemen, care to tell me how the fuck we lost an entire strategically crucial compound to a single wounded soldier?" "Sir," one particularly brave soldier spoke up, "the human took us by surprise and hit us hard and fast before we had the chance to react." Everyone in the tent sat still and looked at the general with fear and the soldier who spoke up with pity, silently thanking the various gods they believed in that it wasn't them to speak. As the tension became thick enough to strangle everyone in its presence, the general began moving over to the poor bastard who spoke up. "Soldier," he continued his approach as it was all the recruit could do not to collapse then and there. "Do you think," he cut his own sentence off with a quick jab to the face, "that is anything new? That I haven't been briefed on the same thing?" His anger continued to a crescendo. "So many goddamn times already?" Corporal punishment was not uncommon among the ranks of the 197th Infantry Division, but not a being there could remember their commander ever being so vicious, carrying his assault on after the soldier had already been bloodied and passed out. Many of them were surprised he let the soldier even live and didn't shoot him then and there for insubordination. The general wiped his claws after his assault and walked back to the far end of the table, standing proud and tall. "Now that I believe we are all clear, someone give me an actual answer as to how 48 seasoned soldiers died and millions of credits of equipment were damaged, if not blown to hell." Anyone in that room could have heard a pin drop from 2 miles away as a single soul failed to speak up. "If someone doesn't speak up right this instant, everyone left alive in this platoon will be shipped straight off to the capital and charged with insubordination." Speaking with hesitance when faced with an all-too-real threat of death, one of the newest additions to their squad began speaking. "Sir, if I may, can I play the recording from the human's black box?" "Finally, we are getting somewhere. Yes, Private, play us the human's recording of his last hour. That might jog some of your memories." The soldier walked up to the general and set down the soldier's recording device. Strange human technology not a single Dusk could properly identify, using a program developed earlier in the war to hack these black boxes, as humans called them, made in the hopes of gaining valuable intelligence. The recording began playing, starting with an injured human leaning against a bomber embedded into the ground sideways, cutting the ground behind it in a fissure, like someone dragged a giant sword through the ground. The human panted for a few seconds before he began speaking. "I am Sergeant Samuel Perez." Leaning his head back and further struggling to catch his breath, there was a long pause before he spoke again, as the general and all the other soldiers stood still. "My platoon was assigned to do a bombing run over a Dusk-owned compound." The malice in his voice when the alien's race rolled off his tongue very nearly caused the commander to destroy the black box. "As you can see," panning the camera as he spoke to a field of blood and rubble, "we failed. We were shot out of the sky by point-dense autocannons. Through some divine stroke of luck, I am still alive." He gulped and began the arduous and seemingly painful process of standing up, causing some of the soldiers to wince and earning them a disapproving glare from their seniors, trying to keep the wrath of their commander at bay. "I've gathered the supplies that could be salvaged from the wreckage." He panned down, showing off a stash of machine guns, plasma pistols, and hand grenades. "And I'm gonna take the fight to those bastards. I won't be able to talk much when I start my assault into their base." Grim determination on his face, he injected his arm with what could only be assumed to be a type of painkiller. I'm not naive enough to assume I have a chance of survival, but when this recording gets back to command, record my last words as follows." He paused and took a deep breath before speaking. "To my wife, Laura Perez, my only regret is that I could not have come home to you, the most beautiful woman I have ever seen. I love you." Speaking his last words with determination, not to win the battle, but just to end with more enemies dead than the Allies, he started walking up to the compound, taking up a plasma-edged knife and a submachine gun. Finding a spot where all that was stopping him to get in was a chain-link fence and a wall he planned to scale. Using the plasma knife, he cut a small hole in the fence and just barely managed to pull himself and the sack of equipment through. He continued his suicide march and scaled the wall like an expert rock climber. He found the first Dusk in his rampage, coming from behind with the knife and stabbing him in the back of the head, lobotomizing and melting the soldier's brain in fractions of a second. They didn't even have a chance to scream. The only thing aside from the video anyone could hear was the commander muttering to himself, "One down." The human continued onto the base, through alleys and shortcuts. It was only at this point anyone realized the date on the footage was 3 days prior to the attack. The human had planned for 3 days before enacting his vengeance. We never stood a fucking chance. Yet the slaughter continued, breaking his silence and charging through one of the guard towers, gunning down 3 soldiers, taking them by surprise and killing them with brutal efficiency. "4 total," the commander muttered. In a stroke of genius, the human held a gun to the back of a terrified recruit and ordered him to speak through the speakers. "Attention all soldiers, we are currently under attack. Please proceed to the western gate to repel the enemies." It was only after the speaker stopped broadcasting and the recruit looked over fearfully that the gun went off. The soldiers looked around, assuming an ambush would meet them outside the gate. They were right at the first part. As soon as roughly 15 soldiers gathered, the human rained down high explosive and incendiary grenades, roasting them all alive if they were lucky enough to not just get blown apart. The soldiers were all terrified. Even the most seasoned veteran could not get desensitized to this slaughter. The commander even permitted the soldiers to leave if they wished. About 10 out of the 22 survivors left, while the more morbidly curious among them stayed and watched. Cover blown, the human rushed out the guard tower, meeting resistance at the door. They took stock, 3 submachine guns and 4 rifles, as well as a handful of grenades left. They took 2 of the submachine guns and blind fired around the corner, filling one full of holes and sending the other 3 reeling for cover. It's only then the soldiers took note of their commander's silence at the guard tower, as he stated, 20. The military training of the Dusks had advised them not to all peek out of cover at the same time, in fear of losing the whole regiment to a hail of machine gun fire and plasma. They peered their heads out one by one and got a round between their eyes like targets at a firing range. 23 dead. The human, now watching them fight this well, they deserved respect. Samuel charged into a hangar where their interceptor ships were held. Another small group of 8 more Dusks opened the door to the hangar, to their horror of staring down the Samuel in one of our ships with all the weapons charged, firing every weapon at once and sending 8 more soldiers to their maker. He fired several shots into the engine of the ship, ensuring it would set off a chain explosion in a mere few minutes. Dear God, 31. Stumbling out the chamber, he threw grenade after grenade and emptied any gun he deemed not useful, sending any survivors left fleeing for cover. Once they began cowering in buildings, he threw an incendiary grenade through every door he could find, burning 6 more alive in the process. 30. The commander paused for a moment. 37. 2 more were foolish enough to try and meet Samuel in direct combat. One put a round dead through his chest, and they thought they had at least halted the incident. Walking over to confirm his death, Samuel sprung like a pouncing beast. He cut one's throat open with a plasma knife he used to get in before emptying the remaining gun he had on the other Dusk. The recoil sent him flying onto his back. He crawled over to the hangar, blood covering every part of his body, and produced a small golden container. It was open to reveal pictures of a human woman standing with a child, and one with that woman and child with Samuel. "I love you, Laura. I'm sorry." The last thing the soldier ever said before looking up at the sky at the stars above, the stars from which we came seeking a war, and stars which he loathed with his whole being. He got 30 seconds to contemplate before the ship was set off, the blast setting off the munitions of the other ships in the hangar, wiping half the compound off the map. The only survivors? Us 22 were lucky enough to not have been in the blast radius. The recording ended with the camera detached from his body by the blast, staring up into the night sky and blinking off. I only took 2 things away from that entire video, being lucky enough to not have witnessed it myself, and it was the only thing I never wanted to do anymore. I turned in my badge that day and was given a discharge, allowed to leave but be shunned for my remaining days. I went home to my wife and found a job at a nearby factory. All I took away was the plea for mercy when the humans came. And when the day came that fire rained from the sky as humans took our homeworld, a single video pinged through my head, and a single phrase occupied my thoughts. We never stood a fucking chance.